Hello and welcome everyone. Today we're going to be continuing with our PvP stats guide with the Consular / Inquisitor to finish everything up. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. Today we're going to be looking at Hatred and Serenity. Our critical, we're going to get it to 4,300. Once we get to 4,300 in our critical stat, Mastery will outperform. The Alacrity is pretty standard with this spec, 7.14%. Our accuracy, we're going to run 0. Most of the spec's damage is going to be yellow damage. We're not really hitting a lot of white damage, so we do not need to run accuracy. Crystals, we're going to run mastery crystals. Our relics are going to be power and mastery because they do outperform crit once we hit that 4,300 breakpoint. Our tactical is going to be 2-time trouble. And our legendaries are going to be dynamic force and force training. Next, we have deception / infiltration. Our critical is going to get to 4,300. After we get to 4,300, we're going to go ahead and max out our mastery. You'll see this basically follows exactly Serenity and Hatred. There's not really any difference between the specs as far as stats wise goes. The alacrity is going to be pretty standard, 7.14%. We're not going to run any accuracy on this spec. It does have some white damage, but not really enough of a deal breaker. We really want the big burst, so we don't want to suffer any type of power into accuracy. Our crystals, we're going to be running mastery crystals because they outperform once we hit the DR. Again, our relics are going to be a little bit strange for this spec. The DR hits so big as far as assassins on the DR curve that we're going to go ahead and run power and mastery over crit, even though this is a burst spec. It'll actually just outperform it. Our tactical is going to be Blade of the Elements. You can run the tactical with 2 cloaks if you want for better survivability, but for general usage, Blade of the Elements is going to give us a little bit more damage. Our legendary is dynamic force and force training. Next, we start going into our ranged DPS classes. We have madness and balance. For this class, we want to make sure we get our crit to 3,800. It's going to be a little bit lower than other classes because it is a dot spec. As you see, dot specs generally get less out of crit than other specs do. Our mastery is going to be stacking after the 3,800 point. So once we get to 3,800 in our crit stat, we want to put everything else into mastery. Alacrity is going to be pretty standard with this spec, 7.14%. Our accuracy is going to be 0. If you are running accuracy on this spec, what are you doing? This spec does not do any type of accuracy checks unless you are hitting with your saber. If you were hitting with your saber in this spec, you were doing it wrong. Our crystals are going to be mastery, and our relic slots are going to be power and mastery. Our tactical for this spec is going to be Tempest of Roe, and our legendaries are Gathering Storm and Unmatched Haste. Next, we have everyone's favorite burst range spec, Lightning / TK. Our crit, we're going to go ahead and get it pretty high to 4,200 since we are a burst spec. Once we get to that 4,200 crit, we're going to go ahead and stack mastery as it outperforms power. The one change to this spec is the alacrity. Since there is a built-in passive alacrity buff, the alacrity breakpoint changes. The alacrity breakpoint moves to 10.38%. Make sure that we're hitting that, not a percentage lower, just so we can hit the breakpoint. Again, accuracy in this spec, you don't need anything. You're never going to be making any type of checks against someone's defensive stats. Crystals, we're actually going to run mastery crystals. And the reason is the DR curve, again, hits pretty hard once we get into this high crit range. So mastery crystals will outperform. And then our relic slot are going to be power and mastery for the same reason. It's just the DR on crit is pretty severe. Our tactical is going to be Stormwatch, and then our legendaries are Gathering Storm and Unmatched Haste. So that concludes the guides for any of the PvP stats. If you guys have any questions, please put them down in the comments. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And as always, see ya!